Live with Cardinal Matt Staader and Cardinal Clark Isaac, both with the Ecumenical Order of Christ. Today we're talking about ancient technology. This is sort of a part two of a series that we previously discussed about the Great Pyramid of Egypt and the technology that it took to build that. Thanks for joining us, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This is not exactly the direction I was planning on going with today's show, but I think the Father had other plans. This is what I woke up with in my head.
All right.
I was planning on talking about the lost civilization of Atlantis
Oh, that's going to be a
today,
very interesting episode.
but it will happen. It
Okay.
will happen. But there is. People have been asking the question, in the Western world at least, ever since the knowledge of the pyramids became common in the Western world, of how these things were built. And one of the prevalent theory for decades has been that ramps of the theories on the actual structure of these ramps, there's a few different theories, but mud brick ramps were built going up to the level of the Great Pyramid, on which stones were basically dragged up and put into position
On wooden logs.
on wooden logs. But
Yeah.
I'll get back to that in a minute, because this
Yeah,
is
that's
a
a
new
that's a
theory I came across.
well, that theory you were talking about, that's a theory that a lot of us are familiar with. We're taught about
Yeah,
that in grade school.
this is a newer one that I've come across recently, and it's the theory that water was used to float the stones into position.
Water.
Water.
So these 2 to 10 ton stones were floated, somehow made buoyant.
The limestone blocks that make up the majority of the Great Pyramid average out at 3 tons, or 6,600 pounds. And this theory, to put it in simple terms, as the animation showed, is basically strapping balloons to them so that they'll float in water.
Balloons made of what material?
The only thing I can think of that they might have access to is using like tanned animal stomachs or something like that in those times. But I'm sure most people out there would have a basic understanding of how flotation works. To make something float, well, a boat is a good example. You need to displace water that equal to the space that the object that you're floating takes up. So, to make a 6,600 pound or 3 ton limestone block float, you would have to strap enough balloons to it to move more than 3,500 litres of water.
Well, you give me some visual aids to show for the audience to see what you're talking about here. So let's go ahead and show that. This is a clip that you pulled from YouTube about this theory.
Yeah.
Right?
Craft. Blocks would be continually moved upwards in threes and fours between each set of locks.
I've never heard of anything like this being an actual theory that they were proposing as to how the
This-
pyramids were built.
This is relatively recent.
Okay, so wow. Surely there
Finally,
must be.
the blocks arrive at the top of the pyramid construction site.
Yeah, I'm gonna
ready
make
for-
this cut. Yeah. Thank you, narrator. Um, so I'm failing to comprehend here, like how they're coming to this conclusion. It, is there any evidence of this sort of thing happening?
No.
No.
The
So they just pull this out of the air and
essentially. And
huh.
despite what that um, the animation shows, the flotation devices would have to be many, many, many times larger than what the stone itself is. Because the comparison of weight between limestone and water is enormous. So you have to overcome the weight of the weight of the water, the weight of the stone itself.
You would think that the what they're using to create this buoyancy would actually be much greater in volume than the stone itself,
Definitely.
based on the density of the stone.
So not only would this channel that they're floating these stones up have to be enormous in its size to accommodate the size of this flotation device, but they would also have to ensure that the whole structure was entirely waterproof, entirely watertight. And to construct something like that could withstand the water pressure and not leak in the slightest would be a difficult thing to achieve even today.
And if something were to go awry, then that would you would have to reconstruct the whole.
The whole thing would get torn apart and the whole surrounding area would be flooded. So all your workers get washed into the Nile.
Sorry. So they just what this looks like to me. I don't mean to like jump the gun here on drawing a conclusion, but it seems blatantly obvious they're just trying to avoid this getting into any sort of advanced technologies.
Yeah, they're trying to mundane it. They're trying to mundane it. They're trying to explain it in the mundane terms.
And just a disclaimer for our audience: if you're having difficulty understanding Matt, it's because he's Australian.
Yes, I apologise for
No, you don't have to apologize for that. It's that we're not accustomed to your way of
verbalizing.
Yeah. Is that how they say it in Argentina? Okay. Yeah, we've got a running joke here about that, but yeah, if you're not familiar with it, there's a theory online that
Australia doesn't exist.
Yeah, and
we're all just paid actors under the Argentinian government.
Thank you.
44 years, I'm still waiting for my first payment.
So let's look at this, the old theory, like what it used to be, right?
Well, I'm sure we've all heard of this theory that these 3-ton blocks were placed on wooden rafts, well, a sled is the term I'm after. And those sleds were rolled on wooden logs over the ground. And those sleds, that was how they transported the stones across ground, and they pulled the hundreds of thousands of slaves it would have taken to pull a single one of these up a mud brick ramp, as we see there. Now, it sounds plausible.
Sure, yeah.
Until you look at the logic of it.
Pulleys and logs.
Any number of people dragging, even on rollers, dragging a 3-ton block would be difficult on flat ground. Then you add a slope to it, which is getting steeper and steeper with every tier that's added to the pyramid. And as we see there, there's been multiple different designs of ramps suggested. And then
each one more absurd than the last.
Well, this one in particular, it would have taken a volume of, well, it's basically the same through any approach, but this one at least would have taken a volume of mud bricks equivalent to the volume of the pyramid itself to provide the surface area needed to move the blocks up there.
Hmm.
Can you see a problem in addition to that?
No, it seems to be perfectly logical to me.
Just,
I see no problem with that at all.
well, one thing
I
that
find
many
this to
people don't think of is imagine trying to turn a corner with this setup.
yeah. Well, like it's probably like like one of those little spinny island things.
The lazy Susan on the Great
Yeah,
Pyramid.
lazy Susan, Great Period lazy Susans. Or we'll call it. Well, how about we could just call this whole thing Great Pyramid Lazy Science?
I like that. I
Yeah.
do. There's now another point. In addition to the difficulty of pulling a 3-ton block up a ramp of any incline, the steeper that gets, the more difficult it is. This design of the spiral ramp does get around that because the steepness of the ramp stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
But the weight of the block itself on any surface would grind those wooden rollers to pulp, basically to sawdust, within probably 100 meters or 300 feet at the most.
So, this video you sent me, could you give us like a brief introduction on what this is?
This is from the same channel that talked about the flotation theory
Uh,
that we showed earlier, but this part, I have to give it credit, does seem to have some, at least some scientific validity to it. It does make a degree of sense in talking about how this stones, the limestone in particular, may have been shaped.
okay. Well, let's give this a little play right here. Should we even use the audio?
It does help for this one.
Okay.
The blocks in the water, it extends the amount of time that the blocks stay soft, increasing the effectiveness of the copper chisels that were available at the time. Using the same process to smooth 5 of the sides of the facing block, the final stage of preparation is to create the out-facing angled side that would create the smooth exterior of the Giza pyramid. An accurately angled groove is created in the shaping area, as shown here. The facing block, covered in floats, is gently moved into place and then lowered into the angled groove. Again, the floats are removed. The water level describes the angle perfectly and is used as a constant marker to allow the stonemasons to create facing block after facing block with a consistent and accurately angled side, ready for the blocks in the water. It extends the
All right.
I have to give the theory, that part of the theory, credit. Aside from the flotation part, the idea of using water as a level to cut the sides of those stones does make a bit of sense. The
These are just theories, and there's not
it's
like
yeah,
I'm just curious, like where are they finding this evidence, or like we were saying earlier, like just pulling it out of the air, like
they're theories. There's nothing, to be honest, even the theory of evolution. Darwin himself, it's openly known that he saw flaws in his own theory.
huh?
But um, the Big Bang violates the first law of thermodynamics.
Which is
The exact wording for it I can't remember right
just
now.
give us a summary.
Basically, it's to do with the conservation of energy, the continual expansion of the universe that the Big Bang Theory claims.
Uh-huh.
It's just not. Where's the energy coming from that keeps things moving?
Oh, right. That's the atheist God.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because they don't. I mean, they don't believe in God, but they believe in magic that occurs outside of God, which is their God. So,
yeah.
but don't dare call it that. Sorry, atheists. I know you don't believe, but I believe you don't believe that you believe.
Is this image on the screen at the moment
I'll put it
for
up.
the viewers?
Yeah, it was on earlier, but
Okay.
let's go ahead and bring it back up.
Completely discounting taking the 3-ton blocks that make up the bulk of the Great Pyramid out of the equation. At the centre of the whole structure is the king's chamber. And the blocks that make this up are estimated at being between 50 and 70 tons each. Now, the limestone blocks were, and this is going to lead me into another inconsistency about the mainstream theory of the construction of the pyramid. The limestone blocks that make up the vast bulk of the Great Pyramid were quarried approximately 400 metres away from the Great Pyramid itself. So that's how far they were supposedly floated or dragged on wooden rollers.
Okay.
One of the things, from what I understand in my reading, it's an accepted rule when stone is quarried for any block of any size, there will be just as much rubble and dust and all that kind of stuff left behind at the quarry or missing space in the quarry to explain that rubble not being there. So stonemasons have calculated from this quarry where the limestone came from that the amount of limestone that is in the Great Pyramid is exactly what is missing from that quarry. If they were cut out with copper chisels and all that kind of technology we're told they had at the time, there would be close to, if not exactly double, the amount of stone missing.
But that's not the case.
No, not at all. But
so every theory that these people put forward
is massive inconsistencies.
Right. So the facts pretty much debunk the theories almost in every case.
The funny thing is, when it was originally completed, in addition to the limestone and the red granite which is at the core of the pyramid, it was also encased in limestone, highly polished. So this would have shone like a beacon in the sun from miles around, if not hundreds of miles. That was later removed by other people. But again, not even counting the 400 metres that they had to transport the limestone, these 80-ton blocks, 80, 70, in that ballpark, 70 to 80-ton blocks of red granite were transported to the Great Pyramid from Aswan, 900 kilometres away.
Did they float those too?
I can't even begin to imagine. I find the idea of floating a 3-ton block to be completely unfeasible. You could probably do it with today's technology. Would it be practical? No. Then try transporting one of these massive blocks, 70 tons or so each, and there are, I'm not sure how many of them, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a significant number. And not only are they the king's chamber, but I believe the cap of the queen's chamber as well is the same thing. Ever since I heard of a certain theory, and again, talking about theories, but this is one that is commonly accepted for its simplicity. It's somewhat ironic that in any circumstance, the simplest explanation is most often the correct one. Occam's razor.
Right. And what would that be for those?
In this case, Genesis 6:4 refers to Nephilim, or commonly understood as being giants as being on the earth in those days.
The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were heroes of old, men of renown. This is basically the giants.
Yeah.
And they have found evidence of these.
There's been sightings of them in isolated places still alive today.
But for some reason, that's not the acceptable scientific theory about how these things were constructed, even though it would make much more sense rather than a bunch of little pygmy human-sized people. By comparison,
Yeah.
these giants may have used the proposed original theory of log rollers and pulleys and the like, but just larger people, or even perhaps that they were able to carry it.
The weight of the stones themselves would crush those logs within 100 meters. So dragging them over a 400-meter distance and 12 to 1,300 feet,
Yeah,
to help translate. For every single stone, each one that was dragged from the quarry to the pyramid, every single one of those logs would have to be replaced 4 times, at least.
so they must have found a way to drag them or carry them.
I'm thinking that's the...
Or, through the utilization of some type of advanced technologies.
That is a possibility, but there are carvings that have been found but kept very quiet amongst the Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Mm-hmm.
I do have 2 examples of them.
Okay, let's see if we got those here. So what is this that we're seeing here?
This is clearly we could say a humanoid figure that was carrying something that does appear to be a stone block.
So that could be one of the maybe 3 ton.
I believe it's a possibility, yeah.
Oh, man, these giants were massive.
I can't remember the exact maximum height they were supposedly recorded at, but I have heard claims of them being anywhere from, say, 12 feet up to heights that were measured in miles. And for one of these individuals who was miles in height, picking up and carrying a 70-ton block of red granite 900 kilometres would just be a bit of light exercise.
And here's another example of these giant people carrying what look like normal sized blocks to them, but clearly are much larger by comparison.
And admittedly, this depiction, I can see flaws in myself.
The ropes,
The
for
rope
example.
and the bar. Would they be strong enough, even when braced across the shoulders? Would they be strong enough to support that weight? Now, if it was extremely thick hemp rope, we know hemp rope is immensely strong.
Yeah.
Extremely thick hemp rope, possibly. And I suppose with the crossbar, it depends on what it was made of and how much of that weight is being supported by the individual as opposed to being carried by the bar itself.
So this could be very well the size blocks that some of them may have needed to carry.
Well, this photo is from Lebanon, actually. I believe it's in the surroundings of the temple at Baalbek. And there is 4 of them there. And although these stones have never moved from the quarries, the smallest of them is 1,000 tons. The largest being over 1,600. I admit I did forget to get images of some of the others, but the 4 largest obelisks in the world that are still sitting in their quarries are all in Baalbek, or the surrounding area, and they range from just over 1,600 kilograms, 1,600 tons to 1,000 tons. But we see them in various places all over the world.
So here we have a part of human history we're not being taught about. Um, it is mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible. It's pretty clear that archaeology is revealing this plain as day, out in the sun, like just sitting there for us to see. We have ancient depictions beyond the Bible that actually show pictograph imagery
Mm-hmm.
of these giant people carrying blocks. Yet we are told something different and expected to believe it.
It's the political systems and it's all intertwined, of course. Education and all that kind of thing that shapes society has an agenda.
Right.
And I don't think that's hard to believe for anyone that's gone to a Western school,
Oh yeah.
a government-funded school in particular.
Yeah. Well, most Ivy League educations are just simply indoctrination.
Yeah, just told the same thing over and over again until you accept it, essentially. But my question with something like this, for example, is why would they cut it if they had no way of moving it? The fact that it's still there, it hasn't been moved, isn't relevant to the question. They would not have cut. No one would have cut a piece of stone like this unless they at least knew they had a way to move it. And this is something that just came back to me about the stones of the Great Pyramid in particular, but it applies even more so to these. Mobile cranes, the ones we see mounted on trucks, even the most advanced ones we have today, or at least as of a few years ago, would have difficulty with picking up and moving the stones that the Great Pyramid is consisted of.
There's a scripture. I know people are familiar with this. That as the days of Noah were, so would be the coming of the Son of Man.
As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man.
Right. So in the times of Noah, the Nephilim were definitely around, active, moving around upon the face of the earth.
They were commonly accepted and known.
Do you think it's possible that they'll return? That they'll come from like someplace where they've been hiding out, like maybe from the depths of the earth itself?
It's a possibility.
I heard. I don't know if I could find this video, but it was wild. It was from the Dead Sea area. Like somebody was filming this and recording audio from what sounded like a giant screaming from the depths of the earth outside of this cave.
Wow.
And I don't know if anybody can find it in the chat. Go ahead and send us a link to that if you could find it. But man, it was bone shattering. The depth and volume of the scream that it was letting out.
Kind of like those screams that have been coming from those caverns under the river. Euphrates River, right?
Maybe that's what it was. That might have been it. Yeah. So, yeah, giant scream from the River Euphrates, cave in the River Euphrates. I'll see if I can find it.
Supposedly, angels chained up underneath there that would be released in the last days.
Right, but angels, Nephilim. I wouldn't say the two are synonymous, but they could be
connected,
very well
definitely
connected, related, and even possibly confined together.
Plausible.
That seem likely. I mean, I don't think any humanoid creature would. I just can't imagine they would be confined alone. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Very well could be their entire progeny, their families that they had created were down there with them. At least the ones that survived the flood.
If I remember correctly, there's supposed to be 4 of them under the Euphrates.
Mm-hmm.
From what I remember of that. But yeah, ever since the Euphrates dried up and the mouth of this cavern was revealed, there's apparently been these screaming, anguish sounding, howling type sounds.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
found it.
Coming out of there.
So this is from TikTok, I guess.
Did you guys know that the Euphrates River is drying up? Well, they found this cave.
All right. So yeah, also fulfilling a prophecy that
Euphrates River. Did you
the
guys know that?
Euphrates River is drying up. So let's go ahead and put this video up here.
The Euphrates River is drying up. Well, they found this cave that was under it, but something really creepy happened when somebody decided to film it. Now, I don't know if this was debunked, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, and I want you guys to tell me what you think. But you can hear like demonic sounds and chains. And people are connecting that video with this passage in Revelations. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God. One saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates."
Are those giant chains in there too? It's scary, man. It's freaky. So they're waking up, but they're not yet released. Right? If they were released, they'd be coming out. And you wouldn't be hearing those chains either.
Mm-hmm.
So how about we just leave it alone and not go anywhere near it, please?
Yeah, good idea. Too bad. Unfortunately,
Once they're released, you won't have that option.
no. Yeah, too late. Missed your opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, people still have an opportunity to learn a great deal about what we've been teaching, what's been revealed on this show,
Yeah.
and then some, a great deal more. If you want to show them the English version, this is a Spanish version, the Return of Christ book.
A lot of work has gone into this,
Oh yeah,
and everything, essentially, that has been taught by the Ecumenical Order of Christ and by the returned Christ himself can be found in that book.
it's available on Amazon. We put the link in the description down below, and you can link to either the Spanish or English version. One of the reasons why we included Spanish version here is because we reside in Baja California. Spanish is the second language in the United States, and since many of us have made our exodus away from our home countries to Baja, Mexico, or Baja California, we've had to learn some Spanish since being here and interact with the locals, who many of which choose not to speak English. So it's a great resource for family, friends, neighbors that don't speak such fluent English, and perhaps they speak better Spanish. But of course, the English is better, far superior language to all others on Earth.
Of course.
It's just a fact. I mean, it's the ruling language across the globe. So if you don't agree with me, about English being a better language, then go to some country that speaks a different language, and
It will be the language of the new kingdom as well.
yeah. But the fact of the matter is, most of the civilized world and most advanced parts of civilization today all speak English.
Yeah. Well, I know of at least, one person I've spoken to myself in Lebanon, and she tells me the same thing, that there's an entire community of people of Arabic descent, and at least in her generation, English is their primary language. They can only speak Arabic at a conversational level and can't write it at all.
And I have difficulty reading some of it too.
Hmm.
So it's good that we have things in English. It's the unifying language across the whole globe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, get your Return of Christ book in English, and Spanish is an option. There might be other options available someday, but buy the book, increase our sales, and we'll make some new language versions. It's a possibility, God willing. But in addition to that, there's also links in the description down below to our social media pages where we're broadcasting this live stream, and many of the times the upload is left as a recording. So go ahead and watch our past episode. Watch part 1 of Brother Matt Staader's Ancient Technology.
I think it was suppressed technology.
Suppressed Technology? It's only a couple of weeks ago, so.
But that was last week, wasn't it? I think that was last Wednesday.
It was. You're right. So
And
yeah, just a week ago.
unless I wake up next Wednesday morning and God tells me something different, next Wednesday will be Atlantis.
I hope God tells you about Atlantis. We want more information. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Cardinal Matt Staader, for joining us.
Thank you for your effort. And thank you for
Oh,
having
it's
me.
no trouble for me. I'm happy to be a part of this. Happy to have you with us, and may God bless you all in the name of the